Topic this morning is Be the Remnant. This is Be the Remnant. Our topic stems from Romans chapter 11. We're going to do a little study here in Romans chapter 11, and then we're going to intentionally chase a rabbit off into the Old Testament. But for right now, we're talking about Romans chapter 11, verse 5. And I'm going to start out in verse 1. Verse 5 is our memory verse for today. Romans chapter 11, beginning in verse 1, says, I ask then, did God reject his people? By no means. I am an Israelite myself, a descendant of Abraham from the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people, for he foreknew, whom he foreknew. Don't you know what Scripture says in the passage about Elijah? How he appealed to God against Israel. Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars. I am the only one left, and they are trying to kill me. And what was God's answer to him? I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by God. And if by grace, then it cannot be based on works. If it were, grace would no longer be grace. Continuing on in Romans chapter 11, verse 7. What then? What the people of Israel sought so earnestly they did not obtain. The elect among them did, but the others were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that could not see and ears that could not hear to this very day. And David says, may their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. May their eyes be darkened so they cannot see and their backs be bent forever. Again I ask, did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgression means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring? I am talking to you, Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles. I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people to envy and save some of them. For their rejection brought reconciliation to the world. What will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the part of the dough offered as first fruits is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. I stopped at verse 16. I'm not certain how far we're going to be able to get today. I would like to cover almost the entire chapter. But the verse for today is in verse 5. Romans 11, verse 5, it says, so too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. All right. So we kick it around in our heads for at least a few moments. What is a remnant? Oh, you guys hit that one pretty good, pretty easy. Yeah, it's the leftover, the leavings, the insignificant. There was a couple of phrases I wrote down here. A small remaining quantity of something. Usually minor part, member, or trace remaining, leftover, leaving, odds and ends, insignificant amount, residue was another one. An unsold or unused end of piece goods. The Anchor Bible Dictionary describes it as what is left of a community after it undergoes a catastrophe. That's pretty good. It says it all. Okay, so verse 5 says, so too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. Why would it be a remnant? An insignificant part? A small part? I'm sorry? Heather, I'm really hurting this morning. I know I saw your lips. Okay. That's our first assumption. Thank you. I thought I was going to be able to say that. Heather said that it was just because it is small, it doesn't mean that it's automatically insignificant, right? That could be, yeah. The ones left after the meeting, yeah, that could be, that's the remnants. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry. Oh, yeah, in Matthew, narrow is the gate that leads to salvation, few are those who will find it. Mm-hmm. Right. And, no, you got it. You get the gist of it. That's exactly right. Matthew tells us that wide is the gate and broad is the path that leads to destruction, and many are those who will find it. That's an excellent point. We used to have commercials in our media, and they said something like, 1 million or 3 million people can't be wrong. Bible says otherwise. that's in our democratic society, that might hold some amount of truth, but for the most part, the majority, in fact, is wrong, scripturally speaking, salvation speaking. The remnant that's used in verse 5. We've already touched on a couple. Oh, Larry? Mhm. That's right. If you think about it, Larry's comment just kind of segues into my comment. Um, who was our rootstock? Who can you trace our lineage back to? Okay, Adam and Eve. Maybe somebody a little sooner. Noah. Okay, Noah. We know that all life on the earth, everything that breathes, was wiped out in the flood. Noah and his sons, and the challenge here is that you've got Noah, the 3 sons, his wife, and the 3 wives, and that's it. And all of the stock, if you will, of the earth has bred from that. Do you have something? Okay. Let's see. Um, oh, uh, there's a choice in verse 5. There is a remnant chosen by grace. Why is this choice made by grace? You got there quick. We didn't earn it. We're not worthy of it. It had to be by grace. Grace comes from whom? That's right. Grace comes from God. And if this remnant were not chosen of grace, it wouldn't be chosen of God. I guess I could somehow earn or work my way into heaven or something like that. Nope, that can't happen. Larry? I think the effects of the grace that's spoken in verse 5 goes a lot further. I think it's far more extensive, such as my grace is sufficient for thee. You look at the passage, why would, oh, Larry? Dead. There's been some speculation on the phrase "done" in that passage, and it's difficult to understand if it solely means work as in accomplishments, or is it done as in deeds? Yeah. If we talk about deeds, it has a much broader scope. Deeds are intent-driven. What's that? Yeah. Deeds is a pretty good word. Right. I think it more wholly describes what's going on. One of the things I had written down, I keep putting this in the wrong place. This is a choice by God, of course, and of course that no one else can judge. Let's say a farmer goes to tend a neglected garden. The farmer ends up removing many weeds. There's very few plants that are behind, but they are the desired crops, and they can now flourish. Fortunately, that choice is made by God. I know I'd hate to be the one responsible for choosing and then holding myself accountable as to why I made that choice. Look in verse 4. Well, right here. Verse 4. And what was God's answer to him? I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. I found about 3 different pronunciations, either in the Bible dictionary or online or something like that. So I'll just ask the general question, who's Baal? Or what's Baal? Ooh, I like that one. False god. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Well, Baal, if you believe that Baal is a real god, then Baal's real to you, but that doesn't make him real in the absolute sense. Baal was a god that was worshipped in ancient Middle East communities, especially among Canaanites. They considered him a fertility deity. One of the most important gods in the pantheon. The pantheon is nothing more than the caveat of the spectrum, or group of gods, if you will. Baal was considered a false god by today's teachings. Back then, depending on where you were in the Old Testament, Baal was quite real. Now, I'm going to take a little intentional side study off this one. Turn with me to Judges chapter 2, Old Testament, Judges chapter 2. In Judges chapter 2, this is verses 10 through 13. After the whole generation had been gathered to ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. Okay. I did a little research on this too. Baal, apparently this simply means Lord or owner. Okay. Baal being a Canaanite god, it could be a noun, and it can refer to a lot of gods. If you reflect back on Greek and Roman mythology, maybe you had it in school or something, a lot of the planets in our solar system are named after Roman gods. Okay. We believe in monotheism, one God. In many cultures, they have the god of just about everything. The god of water, light, air, earth, the god of agriculture, love, war. I mean, pick one. You know, they must have had a sale that gods are us. I don't know. That's a lot of gods. I always would have thought that would have taken a lot of worshiping too. Where do you find the time to worship that many gods? We have enough trouble trying to set aside enough time to worship our God, and that's the one true God. Let's see. If there was one God above all the ancient gods of this time period, it would have been Baal. Baal is kind of minotaur looking, I guess. The imagination says that half man from about the waist up and half bull from about the waist down, and with a couple of attributes on the head, you know. I was putting in my notes that Baal was considered to be a weather god. See, they had meteorology back then. I don't know, but it's what it said in the consult that I looked. Baal controlled the seasons and the rainfall. Thunderstorm was seen as Baal's self-revelation to the ancient Canaanites, and lightning was his weapon of choice to intervene when he saw fit to do so. Of course, now we know rain is vital to everybody. That's where we come up with the expression, right as rain. Rain was vital to the Canaanites. They saw Baal as a fertility god. It wasn't restricted to agriculture purposes. But Baal, as we know it today, idolatry. Baal is no god at all. Baal is, at best, a man-made religion, at best. Turn with me, please, to 1 Kings. What's that? 1 Kings. For those of you who are very familiar with Scripture, we're talking about Elijah. Now, Elijah, you might not look at it this way. Elijah was somewhat a character. I like him. I think he's cool. He's got a little rebellious side to him, just a little tease at least. 1 Kings chapter 18. Yes, 1 Kings 18. I'm going to start out in verse 22. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, and Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood and not set fire to it. Then you can call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, for there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it, and they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, I love this part, this is verse 27, at noon Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is in deep thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Verse 30 continues, Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars of water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Then Elijah commanded them, seize the prophets of Baal, don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. All right, we see from this passage, there's a few things going on. We see Elijah's faith. Wonderful. Okay. By quantity, how many did they have? Yeah, 450. I'd say Elijah said he was the last one. Okay. That's about as remnant as it gets. You got 450 of one type or one belief or one group, and you got one in the other group. That's about as, yeah, well, he had reserved 7,000, yeah. But that's pretty remnant. Okay, so getting past that, I think Elijah might have gotten just a little bit cocky here. But I have to admit, I love the entertainment value of it. In verse 27, at noon Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's in deep thought, or busy, or traveling. I'm still or traveling. I'm still wrapping my head around that one. Why was, let's put a positive spin on it. Why was Elijah encouraging them to summon their God? That's right. That's right. Now, do you think Elijah was testing God because, well, hang on, because what did he ask them to do? The waters, that's it. 4 large jars of water, and do it again the second time, and do it a third time. And the water went all over the wood, the stones, the dirt, even filled up the trench. Oh yeah, water was a pretty serious commodity. Now, if you are saturating, what we know of the physical earth, you're saturating this altar and all its belongings with water, chances are it's going to have a tough time burning. What'd you have, Larry? Okay. Yep. Okay. So obviously he wasn't testing God. Not only did he have faith that God could do it, but he wanted to show the people God's power. The thing that's a little bit more interesting than that is by their understanding and ours of, you can call it the technology, behind wet stuff. Okay? It's just not going to burn that easy. One of the things I love about miracles and stuff like that, when God illustrates his power, we can try, as mankind often does, we can try and explain it away all we want to. But at the end of the day, what is the only viable conclusion? It's a miracle. It's God showing his power. Again, we're no different. We have occasional need to have it reproved to us in our hearts and minds. Once in a while we get discouraged. And we need a little bit of kindling there, if you will. Something has to spark our hearts and keep us going. I remember Cody not too long ago saying something about, we always kind of have that little fallback phrase, we're only human. But he's right. We are made in God's image. There is a certain power through us, not certainly of us, except the gifts that God gives us. But the power originates from God. We know that Baal was a false god. What do we call Baal today? What do we call Baal today? Oh, that's the answer. Okay, I had some examples here too. Anything that gets between us and God is Baal, or of the like. Money, your occupation or position, your car, your home, possessions that you have, popularity, fame, authority, power. Say you got a trophy spouse. Maybe you have a wonder child. Hey, fantastic. Your favorite actor or actress. Maybe your favorite athlete. Perhaps your favorite singer. There's a whole bunch of things that would actually be construed as Baal. I had a colleague of mine, kind of strange. His vehicle was a station wagon. I mean a real, genuine station wagon. In the back, he had this kind of a Faraday cage. it was all over the interior of the back of the car. He had some other strange things in the car. I was getting there. He had some strange things in the car. Okay, long story short, he said that he was preparing for the zombie apocalypse. I said, oh, well, okay, good luck. I had no idea how to react to that one. He had invested probably thousands of dollars into that project. Now, I don't know if this was to impress friends or something. I really am not certain. In that aspect, that became his God. And I sat there and scratched my head. How do you respond to something like that? But anyway, now we've taken that little diversion. That was kind of fun with Baal. Let's get back to Romans chapter 11. Okay, Romans chapter 11. I'm going to just scratch again verses 17 through 21. If some of the branches have been broken off, because I stopped at 16. Verse 17 says, if some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself to be superior to those branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root supports you. You will then say, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Well, there's probably about 3-4 lessons in that alone. What does that remind you of, that passage? I'm hoping something else kind of sticks out in your mind. How about, there we go. How about John chapter 15? Beginning in verse 1, it says, I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. Okay, puts it in perspective. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown in the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. All right. So, again, we have the garden or the gardener analogy. All right. Who's the gardener? God is the gardener. Yes. Okay. So, let's see. The branches. Who are the branches? We are the branches, yes. And of course, who is the vine? Okay, Christ is the vine, okay? It's in I'm sorry? Yep. Now, in verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. That's kind of strange, isn't it? Apart from me, you can do nothing. We often say to ourselves that we do watering, nurturing, planting a seed. Okay, maybe not in that sequence. Who causes the growth? God causes the growth, is what the scriptures tell us. In doing so, we remain tethered to that, I don't want to say chain of command, but that's just the way the vine grows. See if I can find this real quick. There it is. Now, you can stay within your Bibles right where you are. I'm going to flip back here, notionally speaking, to Romans chapter 11. In verse 18, it says, "Do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this: you do not support the root, but the roots support you. The root supports you." That's the origin. Now, for the gardener, God, who's coming along, he's got a couple options here. He sees a flourishing branch from the vine. What does he do? Yeah, he pretty much just doesn't touch it. It's doing great. Next scenario, he sees a flourishing vine, but it's got a couple of little dead leaves on it or something. What does God do? He prunes it. Right. When I was younger, I thought gardening, the gardening term for pruning was cutting off. Well, a little carefully maybe. Not lopping off like giant limbs and stuff like that. Now, let's say we got a branch growing off the vine, and the gardener comes along and sees that branch is just physically dying. What does he do? He tears off that branch, or cuts it off, severs it from the vine. Why? That's good. It could cause one of the others to decline. Go ahead. Yes. We know that the term gangrenous is used in the New Testament. Gangrene, of course, being a disease mostly of, well, the body. And the only thing peculiar to science today, medical science, what's about the only thing they can do with gangrene? Yeah, that's about all they can do is cut it out. They can't cure it. There's no way to cleanse the body of gangrene. You have to cut that part off. That's all we know to do. Do you have something, John? Oh, sorry. Okay, so, oh, I missed it. I'm sorry. Was there another hand? Yeah. Yep. And that diseased branch, if you will, or limb in the physical sense, it was not the intent to enter the kingdom unwhole. Do you remember where the analogy is drawn in Matthew? If your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, for it is better to enter the kingdom, without an eye than it is not to enter at all. But we look at the verse here and we look how deadly to the entire vine that a diseased branch can be. Much like the human body having a diseased limb can be very deadly to the entire body. Oh yeah, I mean, we're just looking at the physical or the obvious, the conspicuous. We're not really looking deep down the psychological and stuff, the ramifications. Do you remember what I told you about stubbing your toe? I used that analogy a few times this year, I think. Anyway, you stub your toe, okay? Normally, when a person stubs his or her toe and it really hurts, how do they walk from that moment? With a limp. What is the purpose of a limp? And that's correct, protect the toe, and heal was the word I was looking for. Very good. There's a healing property that the distribution of work allows the body. If I am incapable for a little while, my wife picks up the slack, and she does a lot of things I would normally do. Takes the stress or work off me, I'm allowed to heal, I recover. Okay. the body analogy is a splendid one the Bible uses frequently. What happens is, we talked about stubbing the toe and you limp. The limp does two things. One, it takes the work off the stubbed toe. Let's say it's my left foot. And the right leg, for the most part, picks up the slack. Well, not just the right leg. Because when I walk, I'll go like this. Got a little shoulder motion going on there, right? Okay, that's it. That's what I was going to get at. The whole body picks up on that need. So it's the big toe that's suffering in the physical sense, but the entire body is going to compensate for doing most of the extra work that one big toe can't handle, at least for the moment, until it heals, until it gets better. Yes, it does. Mine screams. Yeah. But that makes the human body a marvelous machine. And one of the things I enjoy stressing about that, when you limp, and let's say the left toe was stubbed, the right foot picks up the slack of the right leg. And you know something? Did you ask the right leg to pick up the slack? Does it automatically. The shoulders, the arms, anything to get that pressure off that one damaged part.
Another allegorical reality to this too is somebody goes on the problem you have a leg that will not pull its weight at any point.
Right.
The imbalance, the rest of the body trying to pull that weight over time will cause other complications if that's completely on one standard adjustment. Wires that back and forth balance. And yes, we make for the parts that are falling apart in our body.
Mm-hmm.
But also too, you got to get that fixed, otherwise you're going to just another back problem.
That's an excellent observation. If anybody has had the rare gift of seeing me walk, either from front or behind, you'll notice I kind of walk like this. It's a musculoskeletal problem. Okay, it's not some kind of a sought after pimp or whatever the term is that they use to that gating walk, swagger. There we go. Yeah. That is the way that my body has chosen to respond. Most people don't think about it, they only feel through it. Whatever produces the least amount of pain is the right way to do anything. Walk or sit or stand or whatever. We don't think about it. We just do it. That's just the way it does. And that's the way the entire physiology is wired. I think that's pretty impressive. I got time for one more. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. This is kind of a short reading. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. I'm going to be reading in verses 21 through 26. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be the weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable we treat with special honor, and the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. We've pretty much covered this entire topic here, but I can't help but express the unity behind that body analogy. And that's unity is only one of about a dozen topics that we've just covered here in those brief 6 verses. Excuse me. Who's the most important member of this church? Who's next? All right, I'll be candid. Where do I fit in that ranking? I'm glad you were hesitant to answer. I'm glad you were. The analogy, be right there, right? The remarks in the verse, on verse 22, on the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. I've known for decades that those in the medical field have taken out things like appendices, gallbladders, yeah. And I thought to myself when I was young, well, why would God do that? Make something I don't need. It can be just taken out. What's the deal? Well, it wasn't, of course, until later on that I figured it out and learned about it. And, oh my goodness, those things are actually necessary. Like God knew what he was doing, right? Glad he did. What'd you have, Ray? If a what? Oh, it's stub, yeah. Even an injured part is vital. Yeah. John? Yes. Right. Yeah. I didn't cover this. It's in the latter portion of the verses in Romans 11. Let's see. See it broken off. Okay. Pick up in verse 22, if you would, please. Consider, therefore, the kindness and sternness of God, sternness of those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you will also be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. Again. It's like you were saying. After all, if you were cut out an olive tree that is wild by nature and contrary to nature, were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily would these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? Yep. Okay. The analogy, of course, is taking... Oh, see what? The gardener would have to graft them back in. Yeah, we've already learned that God is the gardener. Go ahead.
Yeah, just go along with what Joey said. The thing is that there's an expectation on our part. It's remaining faithful. If we are not faithful, then we cannot grant it.
That's right. We would be the gangrene if we were not faithful. He could not graft us back in. It would threaten the entire plan. Okay. I'm going to let you off the hook today about 2 minutes early. So, but thank you for everybody for your participation and comments. Let's get ready for our assembly.